So, hello everyone. Welcome to PAPERI's Webinar Series. In this special anniversary of PAPERI, my name is Miriam. I'll be the narrator. Thank you for joining us for our session on building a global framework for precision medicine. I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed speaker, Ms. Angela Herring-Page. Ms. Angela is the Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer for the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, GA4GH, based at the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. With over 15 years of experience in genomic and communications, she drives global partnerships and develops strategies to advance data sharing standards and frameworks that enable responsible and genomic research worldwide. By the end of this webinar, you will be able to 1. GA4GH's mission is to enable responsible, secure, and impeccable sharing of genomic and health-related data to advance human health worldwide. 2. We operate through international collaboration across work streams, driver projects, and community forums to develop policy and technical standards. 3. GA4GH has produced a suite of widely adopted products, including APIs, schemas, and frameworks that support real-world in genomics. These products are being implemented by national initiatives, research consortia, hospital and industry partners to power data sharing and clinical use cases. 5. We are actively working to expand and diversify our global community to ensure our standards reflect and serve the needs of all populations. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Angela. Please note that we will have a live Q&A session at the end of the webinar, so you can use the Ask a Question feature to submit your question. Ms. Angela Herring-Page, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Miriam. It's great to be here. All right, let me share screen. Make sure I get the right one. Great. So you can see that, right?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Great, thank you. All right, so thanks everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Like Miriam said, I'm Angela Page. I'm Chief Strategy and Engagement Officer at the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, or GA4GH. So today I would like to share how we're building a global ecosystem for responsible and interoperable data sharing, and also how your community at PAPERI can help play a role in all of this by joining up with us, helping shape standards and ensure that precision medicine benefits everyone, everywhere. So as I'm sure you all know, we are coming on the 25-year anniversary of the first draft of the human genome, which was published in this edition of Nature in June 26, 2000. Excuse me. So that really sort of marked a culmination of nearly 2 decades of global scientific effort, beginning in the early 1980s with the sort of launch of the technologies that were going to be used for this, all the way up to into the launch of the project in 1990. So from 1990, oh my gosh, excuse me, excuse me. From 1990 to 2000, the sort of global scientific community came together over that decade to produce the first human genome. And then in 2000, it was really a turning point for biomedical research and the beginning of this kind of transformation in how we understand human health and disease. And since then, genomics has really moved from this kind of ambitious research concept to a foundation for modern medicine. So in this talk, I really hope to talk about sort of what it takes to responsibly harness all of that progress on a global scale. So like I said, that first genome took 10 years, right? And since then, you can see from this graph just how dramatic the cost drop has been in genome sequencing, and not only the cost, but also the time it takes. So in 2000, that single human genome took over a decade and cost nearly $3 billion US. But today, the same sequence could be generated in under 24 hours for as little as $200. So with these lower costs and quicker timeframes, the number of whole genome sequenced is growing significantly, possibly even exponentially over the last 2 decades and continuing. This estimate from Berkeley Genomics suggests that there's at least 2 million people on the globe today that have had their genome sequenced, and it is actually probably more. This is a kind of a conservative estimate. So the sequencing is taking place in all sorts of different contexts, from national biobanks, clinical sequencing projects, research cohorts. And it's really kind of a dramatic shift in what's possible for for medicine, but the real challenge is actually unlocking all of these data, especially when they're held in disconnected systems all over the globe. So at GA4GH, and I'll tell you more about the organization, I'm just kind of setting the background for you right now. We've been able to count roughly between 100 and 200 major genomic initiatives around the world today. So these range, like I said, from national sequencing efforts and longitudinal cohort studies, clinical diagnostic networks, disease-specific programs, and each of them represents a valuable contribution to this community effort. But as long as the data that each of them houses remains siloed, we're leaving lots of potential insights on the table. So we like to imagine what could be achieved if these initiatives were connected through shared standards. And that's really the vision of what we're working toward at GA4GH, not a single centralized database, but a federated virtual cohort of tens of millions of individuals' data coming from these disparate national clinical research data sets. So data at this scale would enable better diagnoses, particularly for rare disease. It would also strengthen our confidence in variant interpretation, allow us to spot cross-population trends in health and disease, and fuel everything from more representative polygenic risk scores to faster therapeutic discovery and regulatory review. But we can only get there if the data can talk to each other. However, we know that data is and will continue to remain distributed. It lives in different jurisdictions, healthcare systems, and technical environments. It's governed by local laws, cultures, and consent frameworks. And this is, unique to every different portion of the globe where we're seeing genomic sequencing taking place. And that's why we need not just more data, but really smarter infrastructure, interoperable standards that can let us work across those boundaries while respecting the autonomy of the systems and the people behind the data. So that's really the mission of GA4GH. We were founded in 2013 for exactly this reason. We aim to accelerate progress in genomics and human health by developing open, consensus-driven standards and frameworks for responsible genomic and health-related data sharing. We are not a research consortium or a sequencing hub. We are kind of the community, the genomics community, working together to develop the standards layer that connects all of you and the work that you're doing. So GA4GH's seminal product and our very first output back in 2014 was this framework for responsible sharing of genomic and health-related data. And it has underpinned since then everything that we do and reflects a shared commitment across the entire community. And you can read on this slide, and I'll share these slides as well, the core principles and aims of the framework that guide how we develop standards. They're grounded in human rights, centered on trust, and built to ensure that the benefits of science are shared fairly and globally. This is kind of a snapshot of our ecosystem. We bring together a growing global community working to make genomic and health-related data responsibly shareable. We currently have over 500 organizational members, around 350 active individual contributors, and participation from more than 100 countries. But we do know we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that the participation is more inclusive and balanced. Together, this community has developed over 40 standards and tools with more than 200 implementations and deployments demonstrating their utility. So as we look to the future, I've sort of alluded to this already, we're really seeing federation as the model that will underpin genomics if we're trying to achieve that sort of global virtual cohort. Rather than moving sensitive data into centralized repositories, federation allows data to remain in place under local governance while enabling researchers and clinicians to run approved analyses across those distributed systems. This approach respects national laws, institutional policies, and participant consent, while still enabling discovery. The federation also supports scalability. As more data is generated worldwide, we need infrastructure that can actually scale securely, ethically, and efficiently. And GA4GH products are specifically designed to enable exactly this kind of federated, secure ecosystem. So this is what we sort of see as the full life cycle of genomic and health data in a learning health system. It begins with participants and ends with the return of insights back into care and policy, and creating this kind of continuous loop of improvement. And at each stage, GA4GH provides technical standards, policy frameworks, and best practices to ensure that data is used ethically, securely, and effectively. So everywhere you see, and I'm going to sort of walk through each part of this. I know it's a really busy slide, so I'm going to kind of zoom in on each part of it, but I just wanted to show you the big picture to say, like, if you look at this whole life cycle of genomic and health data, and then every single one of these little GA4GH circle logos is a product that we have produced that is now available for the community to use. So I'll just kind of walk through this whole life cycle. So participants are at the heart of the genomic life cycle, and GA4GH supports their meaningful engagement in several ways. First, the diversity in data sets best practices document provides concrete guidance to ensure that underrepresented populations are included in data collection and governance. And this work is complemented by the Your DNA, Your Say study, which explored global public attitudes toward data sharing. We also have an engagement framework for involving, excuse me, and engaging participants, patients, and publics, and this supports participant-centered research design. And then the Public Attitudes for Genomic Policy series, which is kind of like a blog post series, which informs policy through community insights. Next, you kind of, once sort of you've identified the data donor and sort of talked about how do we sort of effectively engage that community, the next step is consenting participants for participating in this effort. And we support this responsible interoperable consent through several key resources. The consent policy and clinical data sharing and consent policy offer ethical and regulatory guidance. And then we have a consent clauses toolkit, which provides standardized language for a variety of contexts, from large-scale genomics to pediatric consent and several others. We also have developed the machine-readable consent guidance, which enables automation and interoperability of consenting. And then the data use ontology, which helps align data access with participant consent. So the widely adopted formats that I'm sure you're familiar with, like VCF, BCF, SAM, BAM, were developed by the Thousand Genomes Project, but were sort of grandfathered into GA4GH when we were founded. And these are really the foundation for storing and exchanging genomic data. And we help ensure that they remain interoperable across systems. We also develop and maintain other core formats that you might be familiar with, like CRAM for efficient low footprint storage. It's a compression format. BED for region-based analysis, and CRYPT4GH for secure data encryption. And then we have the data privacy and security policy here, which helps ensure that sensitive genomic information is handled responsibly. Once the sequencing has taken place, you also want to connect that to the clinical record. And so here we have the family history toolkit, which provides an inventory of community developed tools that can capture family health history, and a statement of best practices that covers approaches and challenges to using this information in clinical care systems. On this point, we offer guidance and ethics boards to ethics boards through supporting documentation and structured review processes. And then we support data stewards by offering the data security infrastructure policy, which can help you implement robust infrastructure and protect sensitive health data. For controlled and credentialed access, we enable streamlined consent-aware access through three key tools. These are, again, the data use ontology, which standardizes how data use conditions are described based on consent. The GA4GH passport, which lets institutions share researcher credentials in a trusted, federated way. And then the authentication and authorization infrastructure, which sort of provides the technical background to verify the identity and manage access securely across systems. The Data Access Committee review standards help ensure fair, transparent, and consent-respecting review of access requests. So once if you just kind of think about this cycle again, you identify, you engage the community, you consent the participant, you do the sequencing, you link it to the clinical record. But now you're getting to the point where we're talking about secondary use and trying to make it available to the research community. And this is where, you apply for access, and then that access is granted. So here we have, or not, and we have here guidance for that community as well. And if access is granted, then that's based on consent, credentials, committee approval, all of that. Then researchers can start to begin to retrieve the specific data sets that they need using standardized secure protocols. And the GA4GH discovery APIs like Data Connect and Beacon help researchers find the data sets and tools that they need even when they're distributed across the globe. So here we have the GET APIs, which allow researchers to retrieve exactly the data that they need using APIs. So RefGet ensures consistent access to the reference sequence. HTS-GET allows for the sort of partial retrieval of the genomic data file, reducing transfer time and load. So you just kind of find the portion of the genome that you're interested in and download just that. RNA-GET enables access to gene expression data. And then these APIs together sort of support efficient federated analysis without moving entire data sets. We also support large-scale distributed data analysis across both cloud and on-prem environments. Things like the Data Repository Service enables uniform reference of data across systems. The Tool Registry Service lets users discover and share analysis tools. And then the Workflow Execution and Task Execution Services standardize how complex workflows and individual tasks are run remotely or in that federated model. And then finally, our variant benchmarking tools help ensure that results are accurate, reproducible, and comparable across platforms. So you have now done the analysis and you'd like to share the data and the results back into the ecosystem, and GA4GH offers structured standards here, like the variation representation and variant annotation standards for ensuring consistent description of genomic variants. The PhenoPacket standard allows for clinical and phenotypic data to be shared in a computable form. And then Pedigree, which supports detailed interoperable representation of family health history, which are all critical for collaborative research and clinical decision-making. And then finally, we guide the responsible return and reuse of data outputs. So the model data access agreement clauses and the guidance on standard licensing agreements helps ensure that data sharing is both ethical and consistent. And our policy on clinically actionable genomic research results supports the return of meaningful findings to participants in a responsible way. And then lastly, the genomic discrimination toolkit helps mitigate downstream risk as data is reused. So these policies kind of close the loop on this whole cycle built on trust, transparency, and global interoperability. So now that we've sort of explored each step in detail, I just wanted to show the full cycle again and just reiterate that together these different stages form an ecosystem where data flows safely and effectively from individuals through research and analysis and back to clinical care and policy. So GA4GH's role is to ensure that each kind of connection point is interoperable, trustworthy, and globally usable, turning data into real-world impact. So now I'd like to sort of shift gears and talk a bit about how we are structured and how our structure is sort of deliberately designed to support this consensus-driven development of all the standards that I've just described. At a high level, our model is supported by a foundation of funders and host institutions who provide financial resources, strategic input, staff support. The foundation that foundation supports our broader global community of contributors and implementers, which you see in this blue arc here. And then sitting at the center of the structure is GA4GH Inc., which is a nonprofit legal entity based in Canada that provides governance, fiduciary oversight, and continuity across the alliance. And you can sort of think of this as like the keystone that holds the broader ecosystem together. Here you can see the specific organizations and funders that fill in each of those points on the structure. It includes national research agencies, foundations, academic institutions that have all committed staff and infrastructure to GA4GH. Our host institutions are based in the US and the UK, not only provide operational support, but also anchor GA4GH regionally. And like I said, US, UK, Canada is not quite global, and we're currently starting to explore opportunities to bring on additional host institutions that can act as these sort of regional hubs, particularly in areas of the world where genomic medicine is growing rapidly and where we are currently underrepresented. This slide shows the full list of GA4GH's official partners. These include our driver projects, which are organizations that have committed to participating in standards development to sort of act as a kind of a representative of the wider genomics community. We try to have sort of a representation across every sort of part of that community. These different organizations employ individual. The signed experts employers down there on the left are organizations that employ individuals who contribute significant time and expertise to GA4GH standards development. So at least 30% or more. So they're sort of like seconded to GA4GH for standards development. And then these partnerships sort of overall are the engine behind everything we do. By contributing real world experience, technical expertise, and policy insight, these groups shape the standards that enable global interoperability in genomics. But it's really, really important to make the point here that just because your organization is not represented as a logo on this slide, that doesn't mean that you're not part of this community. You do not have to be one of these entities to participate. Everything in GA4GH is completely open source, free, and open to the community. These are just the ones that have sort of made a stated commitment to implementing GA4GH standards and providing detailed practical feedback on their functionality. So this is sort of our development cycle in a visualization. So we operate in this kind of continuous iterative process, transforming real world need into global standards. Use cases and challenges are first surfaced from across this community of the different driver projects, strategic partners, communities of interest, things that I either have talked about or will talk about a little bit more, but just the different ways that people sort of enter into the GA4GH community. And these are then sort of challenges and use cases are funneled into our study groups where we sort of explore gaps and opportunities. And if the sort of outcome of a study group is that there's a product that needs to be developed, that will feed into the GA4GH work streams, which are expert-led teams that design and develop the technical and policy standards that I just walked you through a few minutes ago. Then once a product is built, it's tested across a variety of implementation settings, including interoperability projects in the GA4GH implementation forum, but also in a variety of other contexts. And then feedback from all of these different deployments are brought back to the work streams, kind of closing the loop and driving continuous refinement and optimization. So the cycle is supposed to ensure that GA4GH standards are rooted in real world relevance coming in from the community and then shaped by diverse global community input that they're intended to serve. So these are the 8 work streams that we currently have, and they span topics from phenotypic data capture and data security to large-scale genomics and clinical standards. Like I said, they're all expert-led, consensus-driven working groups that power the product development. So now shifting gears once again, I want to return to the framework that I presented earlier. I said it was the foundation of everything that we do. At its core, this framework for genomic and health-related data sharing is quite simple but powerful. And it's based on the idea, which I alluded to earlier, that sharing genomic data is a human right. Article 27 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights affirms that everyone has the right to participate in and benefit from scientific progress. But when data is not shared or can't be used due to lack of standards or interoperability, GA4GH sort of takes the position that we're failing to uphold that human right. So it isn't just about technology, it's about equity. The right to benefit from science applies to all people everywhere, but the ability to access those benefits is not equally or evenly distributed. And that's why responsible inclusive data sharing isn't optional from our perspective, but is essential. It's what makes the next challenge around data diversity so urgent. This is a diagram from the GWAS consortium. So even though the Universal Declaration of Human Rights guarantees the right of all people to benefit from science, the vision, as I'm sure you all know, is not being fully realized in genomics today. Most genomic data still comes from individuals of European descent. And as a result, those populations are more likely to benefit from the insights, diagnostics, and therapies that genomic science currently enables. And if we don't change this, we do risk hardwiring these disparities into the future of medicine. So GA4GH is trying to address this by fostering this kind of global community and building standards that serve diverse contexts and needs. But we know that we're not there yet. And I'll show you in the next 2 slides to help really illustrate that. This shows the sort of location of our driver projects, those 28 initiatives that have committed to standards development and participation. Those driver projects themselves are active in 113 countries, and that geographic footprint is obviously quite encouraging. But when you look at who is actually participating in GA4GH's core work and contributing to standards, co-leading work streams, helping guide policy, we see a much smaller circle. Just over a dozen countries are actually actively engaged in that level. And this is really quite a problem for us, and we need to change it. If we want to close the equity gap in genomics, we need to broaden participation in GA4GH. The standards that shape global data sharing must reflect global voices. And so, we can't really call ourselves a global alliance for genomics and health if we don't change this. And we really would love to work with your community to help change this picture. I'll just go through a couple of different strategies that we're currently approaching or using to try to approach this global mandate. So to increase engagement, we created several entry points into GA4GH beyond just the technical standards development work streams. So one is the idea of our communities of interest. These are informal groups that are focused on shared use cases like cancer, infectious disease, clinical genomics laboratories. They're designed for participants who aren't necessarily ready or interested in diving into the deep technical standards development, but who still bring valuable insights from clinical research or policy perspectives. And these groups help us surface real-world needs, build shared understanding across regions, and shape the direction of new products and study groups. So if I just go back a few slides to this one here, so the communities of interest sort of sit in the middle of this whole circle, and they're basically where we start to identify the needs that surface in study groups. We bring use cases from these middle groups into the study groups to make sure that what we're developing is actually fit for purpose and responding to a real community need. Another core strategy for engagement is our National Initiatives Forum, or NIF. This brings together national and regional genomic medicine programs to ensure that GA4GH standards meet the needs of real-world healthcare systems and policy environments. NIF is also a place where national scale efforts can connect with each other, share lessons learned, and collectively guide GA4GH's direction. NIF is about making sure that standards don't just work in theory, but also in practice across a wide range of national contexts. And these are the current national initiatives that participate in the forum. More than 25 programs, not all of the logos are here, from around the world. They include collaborators like H3 Africa, also Genomics England, Australian Genomics, Qatar Genome Program, Precise in Singapore. And many of these programs are already implementing GA4GH standards, but all of them are contributing insight into how the tools can evolve to better serve their individual population scale genomics efforts. These are the focus areas for NIF for the moment, and I'm not going to read them all, but I'll share these slides and you can dive in deeper if you'd like. Now we also have a focus on, starting to really focus more on implementation now that the first version of standards has been approved and released into the community. Now it's more about providing support to implement those standards into the real world. So not all national initiatives have the resources to just take something off the shelf and pop it in. So GA4GH really needs to start working harder on developing the tooling and the documentation and all of the things around the standard that make it more sort of usable. So we're building things like we're working on a sort of implementation ecosystem, which includes things like a registry of different implementations, so you can find each other and sort of learn from others' implementations and their code, conformance testing to understand whether or not your implementation of a standard is actually sort of doing it the way it was supposed to be done and meeting conformance testing. And then we also provide a series of lightweight starter kits, which are sort of off the shelf, but really more like demonstration code rather than something you might want to use in a production environment. All of these are sort of still evolving, but we know that they will be essential for turning standards into real scalable impact. So just now, the last few slides to close, I want to talk about sort of our contributor community. So as I hope it's already been kind of alluded to, but maybe not clearly put a fine point on it here, is that GA4GH really doesn't exist without all of you. It's built by community. We have 20 people who are paid full time to work on GA4GH as staff members, but that blue bar that I showed you earlier, that arc, is really a volunteer community of individuals from all over the globe and from all different institutions, and they're doing, they're participating in many different ways. They're coming from many different backgrounds and representing different communities. You absolutely do not need to be a software engineer to participate in GA4GH, and I think that might be a myth that we need to bust. Because really, to build standards and policies that work across jurisdictions, across healthcare systems, across populations, we really do need every perspective at the table. So if you're wondering whether GA4GH is a place for you, then the answer is yes. And if any of this resonates, I hope that you will try to get engaged. You can join a work stream, you can propose a pilot project, contribute feedback to any of the standards that come out as they're, during the open comment periods. You can join these communities of interest. It's all on our website, ga4gh.org. You can also email any of us at any time to learn more about what we're doing or how you can get involved. Just as a sort of acknowledgement slide, this is our board of GA4GH Inc., which is a real deliberate way to try to reflect that global mission. Members from institutions across Africa, Asia, and Americas, and Europe. Even though, like I said earlier, the map itself is not quite there yet, we're really leveraging this community here in our board to help us grow globally. So thank you again, Angela Page, and please do not ever hesitate to reach out if you have questions or want to talk more about GA4GH. And I will stop there. Thank you so much. Happy to answer any questions. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Angela, for this insightful presentation. And we will now open the floor for questions from our audience. So please, if you have a question, use the feature raise your hand or type the question at the chat box. Dr. Wafat? You're on mute.
Yes, I prepared a lot of questions. Thank you so much for your informative presentation. I have many questions. So let me start with as GA4GH aims to build a global framework for precision medicine, how does GA4GH ensure that this vision is inclusive of the priorities and the context of low and middle income countries, especially in Africa?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely something that we have work to do. Right now, or like historically, the strategy that we have used to ensure that community has a voice at the table is through engagement with our driver projects, and H3 Africa has been really the primary representative, I would say, of the African community. But I don't think that we're doing a good enough job currently at like deliberately reaching out to the low and middle income community beyond H3 Africa, because obviously that's not everything. And so I would really like to work with you and others sort of like in your sort of position, from other regions of the world to try to figure out what are the best ways to do this. And of course, it's going to be different depending on the community that we're talking about. Like what's going on in South America, the needs there might be really different from what the needs are in Africa. And then when you talk about indigenous communities where there's a whole bunch of ethical sort of questions which are really different from just the sort of most straightforward ethical questions, that we've already tackled. Like every single one of these is a very unique context or unique conversation. So we really need to start having, I'm thinking possibly, I presented those communities of interest. It's possible that we develop a kind of a community of interest that's specifically focused on this question. We've also started to talk about, I mentioned the host institution and sort of launching regional hubs in specific areas to help address this, but also another thing that has come online recently is the idea of a kind of a satellite working group. So for instance, we have a rare disease community of interest, and we're talking about developing a satellite rare disease community in Asia so that that community can sort of, surface the rare disease use case in that, in that sort of closed context where they can build trust and sort of have a more regionally relevant and time zone friendly experience, and then feed that back into GA4GH, the sort of main thing. So there's a lot of ways we can do this, but we are not there yet. And I really do hope to work with you to figure that out.
Thank you so much. I have another question.
Please.
Yes. You said that GA4GH work through global driver projects and work streams. How can early career researchers or institutions from Africa get involved in these collaborative efforts?
Yeah, it's very, very easy. It's both very easy and very hard. Okay, so the first step is just show up. Anybody is welcome. You email me and I will send you the information. You can join the calls. We have a Slack community. We have regular Zoom working group calls, and anybody in the world is welcome to join those. The calendar is on our website. You can identify the meetings that are relevant to your interests and say, just email me and say, I want to join this meeting. We'll send you the information to get in there. The problem is that there's a lot, these conversations have been going on for a long time, and sometimes it can feel very overwhelming. It sort of feels like you're jumping into the deep end when you join one of these calls, because it's like you're joining in the middle of a conversation that's been going on for years. So we really are trying to provide like better onboarding resources for the community to help you kind of understand what is the conversation that's been taking place so far. We had tried to set up a kind of a buddy system where anybody who's new to the community can sort of get an individual sort of partner with them who has been there for a while and can help you sort of walk you through the whole, all the details. That has been of limited use because getting people to participate as buddies has actually been a challenge, but it's something we really do want to do more of, because I think having that person to sort of hold your hand and walk you through and answer all the deeper technical questions as you're trying to get on board is very useful. I see that there's a question in the chat. Should I go ahead and answer that one? So thank you. You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Do you have plans for remotely training scientists in Africa? This is a great question. So we do have plans for more like training workshops on how to use the GA4GH standards. They have not yet been developed. We're actually putting in for our next round of funding right now, and this is a very important focus for us, is develop these training resources. We did have one training, live in-person training workshop in conjunction with Al-Wazi a year or two ago, and we're trying to turn that into something that can sort of be reproduced in a virtual context. We would have like webinars and things like that. And if this is of interest to your community, then definitely reach out and ask for it. We, struggle to sort of bring things to the table unless there's a real, community need or like a request. So if you do think that this would be useful, please let me know in an email. We can talk about what that might look like in reality. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Page, for this insightful presentation, and thank you so much for answering all of our questions. Just wanted to let you know that it was a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you again, and thank you all for attending. And we hope you have had an informative and enjoyable day, and please have a great day. Thank you again, Ms.
Thank
Angela.
you so much. Thank you. And I hope that you'll be able to, I'll send the slide deck to you, and hopefully you can circulate that to your community and everybody can just, take it from there. So thank you so much. It was really a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
The pleasure is all
Take
ours.
care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.